All right, let's get ready. Go ahead and get started here. You are here. The subject that we're going to be talking about today is toolchains are only as strong as their weakest link. And this is a discussion about interoperability with different CI/CD tools. This conversation is actually more about one of the special interest groups that we put together. It's called the Interoperability Special Interest Group. It's part of the CD Foundation. And I had the pleasure of meeting actually Mauricio today, amazing, and the rest of these gentlemen all at this group. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and let you know where they come from, just so you have an idea of the background, and then we're just going to start having a discussion here. So first of all, I guess myself, Melissa McKay, I am a developer advocate with JFrog, and I was interested in these organizations and what we actually talk about. I got involved with the special interest group just recently. I'm now a co-chair of that organization at the moment. Fatih, would you like to go next?
Thanks, Melissa. Fatih Degirmenci. I joined the Continuous Delivery Foundation recently, last week, to lead the efforts of our community from Ericsson. And I was involved in Continuous Delivery Foundation since its very early days. And I was part of Special Interest Group Interoperability. I am still part of Special Interest Group Interoperability. And now, thanks to Melissa and Justin, we will continue pushing our efforts forward. And then we also started a special interest group around software supply chain. I am currently co-chairing that group, and I am from Sweden.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea Frittoli. I'm a developer advocate and software engineer at IBM. I'm also involved with a few interest groups, a special interest group, the CDF, with interoperability, and I co-chair the events special interest group. And I am a maintainer of the CD events project, which was created by the events special interest group. And with Tecton as well.
Awesome. Hello, I'm Justin Abrahms. I'm a principal architect and the head of the open source program at eBay. I'm involved in the CDF as a general board member, I think is the name, and also the chair of the Interoperability SIG with Melissa. And I'm also a maintainer of Open Feature, which is adjacent.
My name is Mauricio Salatino, and I joined the CDF pretty early on as well. And I think that I've been jumping between different groups, like interoperability is one, but most closely involved with CD events and the CD events initiative. I'm working from VMware, but full-time working on a project that it's called Knative. I don't know if you have heard that before. And I'm really passionate about like integrations. I've been doing software integrations for a long time, and I think that the CD events project is a very, it's a very worth project to spend time and just collaborate with different companies and different people that it's interested into promoting more interoperability in the tools that we are creating in the cloud native space.
Awesome. So I don't know if you can tell why I assembled this group just from their introductions. They come from amazing backgrounds. They're all very passionate about what they do. They're very much involved in the organizations. And these are going to be, the decision makers and the king makers moving forward. So this is something that we should all pay attention to, how these projects are actually built, where they are born. And my first question is going to be to Fatih, just to describe how the special interest group named Interoperability, how that came about.
Thanks, Melissa. The origin of special interest group Interoperability goes back to other communities. Before joining Continuous Delivery Foundation as a contributor around 2019, I've been contributing to Linux Foundation networking projects, OpenStack, Zool, and so on. And during those days, around 2016-17, we started having troubles to bring different open source technologies together, like platforms or network, software-defined network controllers or applications, because all these communities were using different CI/CD tools and technologies, and there wasn't an easy way for us as community to bring these technologies together, deploy them, and test them. And around those days, we start conversations around how we can tackle this challenge, because we can't possibly integrate all these different tools with each other. Even if we tried, the integration is costly and it can be broken on a daily basis because communities like to change things because they move forward. And then when CD Foundation was established around 2019, that gave us a chance to reach out to the projects and communities who we are actually have been working with and using, such as Jenkins, Spinnaker, and so on. And we then said, this is a perfect place for us to actually bring this topic up and start talking around the topic with the maintainers of these projects and with our colleagues, friends from all these other communities, from networking, OpenStack, Kubernetes. We proposed the formation of special interest group Interoperability 2019 November, I think, during KubeCon San Diego. And then it got approved, and since then we have been doing our work to, raise the awareness and get more people involved and trying to find out how we can address these challenges and move towards true interoperability.
Awesome, thank you, Fatih. And give you all some background of where this group came from, what problems we're trying to solve, and where we're going to go from here. The next question I'm going to give to all of you, I'll just do a little bit of a round robin. There's two words that have come up today, and they come up frequently. We hear interoperability, which is the name of the group, and we also hear integration. And I'd like for each of you to describe how you got involved with the interoperability group, or something coming out of the interoperability group, and what those two terms mean to you, why they're important to you. I'll start with Mauricio.
All right, difficult question, but I will just try to tackle it. So, difference between integration and interoperability, right? I think that more from like the technical background, like when I'm building system integration, system-to-system integrations, I'm thinking about like writing glue code to connect one tool to another, right? And the problem is that when you have so many tools, like if you look at the CNCF landscape, there are so many tools that they are like sharing some principles, but they were not 100% designed to work together. And if you think about like integrating all these tools to achieve something, well, you will spend a lot of time trying to integrate them all in order to just achieve whatever you're trying to achieve. In the other hand, when you are building interoperability, what you expect is to have a common vocabulary that all these tools can talk, and then you can just build integrations based on that common vocabulary, which reduces the amount of glue code that you need to write. That's coming from a very technical background, but that's kind of like why I got involved with CD events and why I think that CD events is, again, like a project that makes a lot of sense. I'm also kind of like in the process of writing a book that is called Continuous Delivery for Kubernetes, and I think that it makes a lot of sense in that context when you're building platforms, targeting a platform like Kubernetes, and where you are going to be putting a lot of projects in there that they need to talk to each other, and also you need to have kind of like an overview of what's going on in these different tools by just using the same vocabulary. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. For me, the difference between integration and interoperability is kind of rooted more in like a math context in my head, which is like, if you have to do integration between CI providers, you have a plethora of them available, and you end up having to do combinatorics of, does every piece talk to every other piece? And that is a lot of code to write and maintain, and that is not fun for anyone. And I think of interoperability more as like a vision of the future. Like, instead of meeting all of the projects where they are today, we envision a future data format, and then we say, hey, can you get on board with this vision? And if not, why not? Let's fix it. And then once we're all in agreement, let's go forward together, versus having to kind of meet all of those many projects where they're at.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. It's hard to add to it, but maybe something that I can mention is, for me, integration, like you said, is point to point, so two systems talking to each other. But interoperability makes it possible for these two or more systems to talk to each other, but it goes also beyond that, also to the future, because it fosters like the creation of an ecosystem of tools that can then rely on the fact that they will be able to understand all the other components. So like in our case, in the CI/CD space, if everyone is telling the world what they're doing in the same language, then you can start getting this data and make sense out of it.
Makes sense.
And I agree, three of you. It's difficult to disagree. I think the thing is like the key thing I had to deal with during my previous job, like while I was operating CI/CD systems or production systems, like as Justin explained, like which tools we should be integrating with each other. What about the next tool we want to bring into our pipelines? And you always have to keep up with what's happening with the projects. But if we have the true interoperability in place, we don't have to touch the existing system. We just hook the new tool or technology into our existing production systems, and it just starts working because they all use the same language. So it's kind of like you don't have to destroy anything, because if you are trying to integrate something to an existing system, you may have side effects, which may break things, which may stop your pipeline, which may block you to roll out an urgent bug fix. But if you are like adding a tool that speaks in the same language, you have very low risk compared to how it would be with integration. Again, like it's, yeah, we can't fix all the tools and get them interoperate with each other. But again, looking at the future and thinking that way and starting to think interoperability terms is critical. And I think that is the important thing to perhaps think going forward.
I think one thing that I would add to that is, like, when you do an integration, that's like a developer writes some code and then it's done, right? Like you don't have to do a lot of work. And so it's really nice from a getting things done perspective, but lacks scalability. And I think one of the other important differentiations is integration is a technical concern. Like, what is the API contract for that? Okay, I'll write this Python code that does that. And when we do interoperability, it actually becomes like a socio-technical problem where there's a lot of people stuff that you have to talk through. And vendors who have existed for 15 years want their thing that way, and the new vendor wants their thing a different way because of all these other problems. And so, like, you get scale with interoperability, but you also have to take on all of the social problems that come with dealing with humans.
Yeah. Really, really good points. Something that I would like each of you just to discuss briefly is, first of all, we have a lot of members of the CD Foundation, a lot of corporate sponsors, but we talk a lot about open source projects as well. I think most of us use them in our day-to-day work. I do, at JFrog, of course. And I want you just from your background and your opinion, why does this matter? I mean, it seems like it makes sense for open source projects, but why does an organization like this matter to a corporation? And I'm going to start with you, Mauricio.
So, like, the question is, like, why the CDF matters, or?
Why the CDF matters, why getting involved in these special interest groups matter.
Well, that's definitely important. I think that it's like there's the open source aspect of it, but also the, like building an ecosystem that it's healthy and it promotes best practices, and it promotes also inclusion in the sense that you can bring more tools, and more tools should be able to be working together. I think that for corporations, I think that there is a big benefit on being able to play nice with other corporations, and also to support customers that are actually customers from multiple vendors. And they want to get stuff done, and they are blocked by these vendors not working together. So it's like bringing more synergy. And joining kind of like as an individual to the CD Foundation or one of these groups is very rewarding, because you will learn a lot in a multi-vendor environment where there will be a lot of collaboration. There will be a lot of different point of views, and from that you definitely gain a lot of experience and build your career.
Yeah, that's awesome. For me, a lot of my day job is spent doing a lot of discussions with people around the learnings of the DORA program, so state of DevOps stuff, and research shows that when you unlock capabilities like continuous delivery, you have better outcomes for your business. And selfishly, it is dramatically more fun to be a developer in a place where you don't have to do manual verification processes and everything's automated. And so to me, like, the CDF is important because it provides common language in which to talk about these tools and capabilities, and provides best practices, which is a different SIG, around, like, how do we do continuous delivery? What does a pipeline really look like, and what should the components of it be? And I think those are important things to tackle so that we can get past the basics and into the interesting stuff?
Right. For me, I think for a corporation it's very interesting to get involved in these groups because first of all it's a great opportunity to contribute like your use cases and influence the direction these interoperability or standards they're going in a way that it makes sense for the things that you're doing, and also then if you're building a product or a service and that you offer this to customers. And if your service is interoperable with other tools that your customer already use, it just makes it easier to integrate. You know, it's a very good selling point, I think.
Yeah, I think I will refer back to Justin, a conversation we had on Slack like a month ago around that topic. I think I see this community as the place to innovate in CI/CD ecosystem. Like some of the conversations that are taking place, like the one I referred, the intent-based pipelines, they could become real, critical, impactful things. So if you are a vendor, if you don't want to miss what is being currently discussed within the community, you must be there. If you arrive late, you may be late. If you are there right now, you can take part in those discussions and impact how the community is thinking and contribute to those efforts. And like the innovation aspect is so critical because like it literally prepares you for the future, because you will not be hit by a sudden, new thing that is coming out from the community, like how CD events happened. CD events came out like that way. Conversations around few contributors, and then it became a SIG, then became a project, and similar conversations are happening on a daily basis. So I think regardless of the company type, end user or vendor, I think it is important to be there. It is important to be talking with the community and contributing to those discussions. Again, the development, like how we are talking about shift left, development is also shifted left, because most of the products today use open source, say 80%, 90%, I don't know. So if you are not in the community, then you may be, missing quite important things, because those things will become your products in a year or 2 years' time.
Yeah. So my takeaway from all of your comments, this is how you get on the cutting edge. This is how you stay ahead of the game. This is how you put your 2 cents in. Each one of us come from different backgrounds, from different companies. We all see the value in becoming a part of a group like this and solving the bigger overarching problems that we all struggle with every day. I know as a developer, it's kind of a little hard to see that high. You're down here, you're working on that, like actual integrations, for example. But being able to see something a little bit at a higher level, joining one of these groups, being able to solve the bigger issues so that you don't have to struggle so much as a developer, these are things that I like to see, and one of the reasons I'm involved in this group as well. How many of you in the audience are familiar with CD events, aware of CD events project? Awesome. Have any of you tried it? Brought up the SDK, start working with it? Cool. Okay. So my next question I'm going to direct to Andrea. You predicted that. I want each of you to tell me what you're passionate right now that we discuss in the interoperability group or in other SIGs that you're involved in or other projects you're involved in, like CD events. And I'm starting with Andrea because you started with CD events and have a lot to do with the success of that project. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about what it is for those of us who don't know and where they can find out more information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Melissa. So CD events, it started from the SIG events. It's a relatively new project. It's incubated in the CDF. And we are building a specification for events in the CI/CD space. So we want to define a common language so that projects and the tools in the CI/CD space, ranging from configuration management system to CI/CD tools, build tools, test, artifact repository, deployment tools, etc. So they can emit events that are in the same language, which enables tools to talk to each other. So if you want to create a workflow that goes across those tools, you can do that. But also it enables to collect data from all these tools and make sense out of it. So we have a nice white paper about CD events. We have a table in the sponsor hall. So if you haven't, feel free to go and pick one of our white papers. So right now we are focusing on a few things. We are getting to the initial release of the spec out. We are building SDKs for a few languages, Go, Java, and Python. And another thing that we are doing a lot is less technical, but more like really talking to a lot of people about CD events. We had a day zero event at KubeCon, all about CD events, with great talks there. And yeah, so also here, it's a great opportunity. We are talking to a lot of people because the way we want to develop the project is use case driven. So we want to be listening to what our people needs, what they need in terms of interoperability, and we then implement POCs. That's why we already have some SDKs, because we need to implement those POCs. And yeah, to make sure that we are driving this in a direction that is actually solving problems and creating potential solutions.
Cool, I can go next. I think the thing that I'm most excited about is, honestly, it's like some of the definition work that we're doing of like figuring out what the steps of a pipeline are, what are the stages, and like what sort of things can you do there? Like, okay, so we built a thing, that's good. What other things can we do to make sure that builds good? And so one of them is like test it, like run tests, that makes sense. But we might also do like static code analysis, or like with a security mindset, or from a code correctness standpoint. And like coming up with a common vocabulary for what those different types of thing are, as well as here's some cool things that you didn't know that maybe you're not ready for, but in 6 months or 5 years, you know that like doing dynamic application security scanning or fuzzing is something that you could be doing, or like the chaos engineering stuff that people do. It's like, that is a thing that people do, and this is the effect that it has, and, you know, get your gears turning, because there's cool things ahead in your CD journey.
I just want to add something you mentioned, Justin. I think this is about history of interoperability SIG as well. I think the first thing we did within the group around 2020, March, April, is to look at all the available tools and technologies, Jenkins, Spinnaker, GitHub Actions, GitLab pipelines, and so on, to identify what is one thing called there, like stage versus step versus activity, pipeline. And since our group had people who use different tools, we as humans couldn't even understand each other, because like what I call step is called task in Tekton, for example, and vice versa. I think this, like having us as humans talking and understanding each other is a critical step to take, and I think we achieved that up to a certain level. We can still do more than that, but I think we have a good baseline now where we can lean on and build more common definitions and go into details like static analysis, testing, and so on.
Yeah, good stuff. And I really like that problem, trying to solve like the vocabulary aspect of it, and conceptually, what do you need in order to basically define the terms without like being so intrusive that a tool that already has their own terms can actually use that vocabulary and still be functional and complete, basically. I'm kind of like very practical. Like I'm really passionate about building stuff and building integrations and doing that stuff. That's why my participation in the CD events group is much more like building stuff, building SDKs, and just trying to get the stuff done more on the practical side, just to see actually kind of like what developers will face when they try to adopt something like this, like a common vocabulary. And again, it all started because I had like 8 projects, like 8 different open source projects together working for like just implementing a use case. And it was pretty difficult to get like a single view of what was going on between all these tools. And I've created something pretty similar to what we have in CD events, but then I realized, well, this is creating my own version of it. It doesn't make any sense. And then I realized again that most of the companies are doing something similar, so it's worth the time just to have kind of like a single point, like in a specification where we can just all share and then build tools on top of those abstractions. And then just, we can go even higher on more abstraction layers, but at least we have a common-based understanding between the different tools and what's going on. I'm really passionate nowadays about trying to solve that question. One question that was asked yesterday in Andrea's session about how do we ask different vendors to adopt these kind of specifications. It's a very difficult question to answer because you cannot force companies to just adopt stuff. That's not going to happen. So I've been doing a little bit of research about how can we just be more proactive into providing, let's say, mappings or transformations for things that already exist to a common vocabulary like that, the one that we have. And I'm 100% sure that this problem has been solved before, several times for different specifications. So I will just keep looking out and just trying to come up with a single solution.
I think the thing that Corey Doctorow mentioned earlier today around like network effects makes a lot of sense, because once you have 6 out of 7 who support a data interchange format, then it becomes less of a we need to convince that company, and becomes more of like, hey users, did you know that this company doesn't do the thing that is awesome and everyone else does? Yeah,
100%. Like the problem that I'm seeing with with the numbering, like just looking at the numbers and making sure that big vendors are providing that, is that convincing these big vendors in the first place is pretty hard unless you have a pretty strong case. And I think that we are building that case, but it's going to take some time. And in the meantime, I think that we have a couple of different approaches that I think that I will be discussing in a session in an hour or so.
So what you've just witnessed right here is a discussion we would have in one of our SIG interoperability groups or one of the other groups as well. This is how we talk about things. This is how we discuss things, come up with new ideas. All of us come from different companies, like I said before, different backgrounds. So we all come from our individual use case scenarios and our own silos. And it's been incredible to be a part of this group. I've learned a lot about what other people are doing in the industry, how they're solving these problems, and I encourage you all to also become a part. These meetings that we have, they're all public, they're all open. Go to the CDF website. You can find information about when we meet, and go ahead and get involved. Oh, I also want to take a moment just to plug CD events one more time. We are having the Community Day on Friday for CD events. So if you're curious about it, if you haven't looked at it yet, you want to take one of these white papers, have a look, actually try it out, work on it on Friday, you're welcome to join.
I think I'll add about the interoperability meeting is that it's not scary. It's not like getting on stage in front of a bunch of people who are staring at you, kind of scary.
Yeah.
No, it's just like
exactly
a Zoom call
like
where you hop on and talk about continuous delivery stuff with folks. And so, pretty low stakes.
All right, we just have a few minutes left, so I want to open it up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions or anything you'd like to ask any of our panelists or myself? Going once? Anything? Okay, I'm going to bring this over to you.
What's the percentage of work that you do in the open source community during your day job versus personal time? Because I've been trying to do more and more open source, but my day job gets in the way, and then my kids get in the way of my personal time. So, it's a challenge. So curious as what that split is for you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent question.
I would say I do 90+% of my work in open source during my workday. Part of that is because I'm the head of the open source program. But that's not actually the bulk of my work. I have pushed internally, so we're building a feature flagging thing inside eBay for internal use. And we could go build our own client library, or there's this project called Open Feature who's trying to abstract that in an open source interoperability way. And so I got involved in that, and I'm writing open source Java code that I'm going to then use in my day job. And so it's about turning my work problems into, eBay doesn't care about feature flags. That's not a competitive advantage that we have. It's pretty standard in the industry. And so why shouldn't the work that we do be open source? Because we'll get help maintaining it, and it looks good for eBay, and like there's a bunch of good reasons for that. And so having that conversation is a really important one that has enabled me to be able to do my work mostly at work.
Are you hiring?
We're always hiring.
Yeah, I would say that for me it's like 200% of the time, right? Like I'm doing on my day-to-day job plus on my personal time, mostly open source. And I think that that's kind of like the question, like companies are hiring people to do that, like on their day job. I guess that my recommendation would be more just to start trying to collaborate, maybe a little bit on your free time, but there are definitely opportunities out there just to do this full time. It's becoming more and more important, and I think that companies nowadays they kind of like understand the benefit of doing so.
Yeah, I guess for me too. I mean, my day job is open source, and but I do work with, of course, within the company, but it's also like helping people doing open source or listening to what we need in the company and making sure we do that in open source. So I consider that all part of the open source work.
I think one thing that I would add is in many companies, there's a delineation between application developers and platform developers. And so like the application developers are adding new add to cart buttons to eBay's homepage, right? And you're not going to open source that. No one cares about the add to cart button except eBay. But all of the platform tooling is using a lot of open source code and is not core to our business. And so there's a much easier sell about open sourcing those things. And so even within other companies, working on platform teams that use open source code allows for that, whereas it would be a much harder sell in a world where you're like writing feature code for end users. So.
Cool. Great answers. I encourage you, bring that question to one of our meetings. Maybe we can discuss. That would be great. All right, thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to wrap this up now. You can find us. We'll be here, most of us, through the rest of this week, I think. So track us down if you have any more questions. Follow us on Twitter. Come to one of the groups that we have. We'd love to see your faces. Thanks.